Five.
All right, gents. Welcome to the newest edition of the Line and Length podcast. This is your Line and Length, and also vodcast now. You can actually watch the three of us do this live on, or not live, but on YouTube. So I'm joined here, Kelly and James Lombardo. Gents, how are we?
Yeah, really great, mate. It's a beautiful day in Sydney. It's sunny at the moment, and can't complain. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, mate. And Kels, you're doing well?
Mate, going real well. Just down here in Wagga. Going real good. Look, pretty excited for this one. This will be great. I know Lombi's got a really good story to tell. He was an integral part of Line and Length, how personal it's got. And I referred to that last week in my podcast. So I'm really looking forward to this. I reckon this will be pretty powerful and impact a lot of people. This will be good.
Awesome. So just quickly before we dive in, boys, the reason that I sort of brought this to Kels as a way to bring Line and Length to everyone while we weren't able to get down to Tumbarumba this year. So this is just another sort of format that we can get Line and Length to everyone and tell these really important stories to everyone. So without sort of further ado, Lombi, Line and Length, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a real big one, to be honest. I was thinking about it just yesterday and a few days before, and you know what it has meant to me over the years from when we started back in 2016 to where we are now. My own personal story is, it's not uncommon, it's not unusual, but for me at the time, and for a number of years, it felt like it was, and getting to Line and Length and having discussions with people and talking about my own battles with depression and anxiety and things like that. It's just given me such a platform for support, but also just a platform to talk about things with my friends and have people around me who may or may not have gone through similar situations, who may or may not know or understand. But, you've just got all your mates around and you've got a really great group of people who are willing to be there for you at the day, obviously, but even there afterwards. I mean, from sharing my story the first time in 2016, each subsequent year, I've tried to make a point of getting up there and talking about how I'm going and what I've been feeling and even just stories of people reaching out to me. I mean, from 2016 to where we are now, I think every year I've had at least 2 or 3 people reach out to me on the day or even past, months later saying, hey, I'm feeling like this. What do you recommend? Or I'm having a bad time, things like that. And to me, that's just so impactful about what has been created in the environment that has been established, really.
That's so true. Did you also feel, Lombi, like you just, when you announced it, because you were before me, did you just feel like the weight of the world come off your shoulders?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess for me, Kels, it was, I've been struggling with depression and anxiety for a really long time before Line and Length.
Yeah.
And my story is, I guess, is not uncommon to a lot of people, but when we were sort of growing up and early days at uni and things like that, I would just sort of combat that with self-medication. I would drink a lot. I would do recreate just to try and cope. And I remember when I first sort of went and sought help, and this was before Line and Length, just beforehand. And that was a relief. But then when I talked about it in front of you guys and lots of friends who might not have ever known about that story, it was something that I can't describe. It's a weight that's lifted, but it's also almost like a selfish catharticness that you feel empowered by talking about this to your friends and seeing the responses that you get from that. It's something you can't describe. And I really, something that I really enjoy doing is talking about what I've been through and learnings that I have every year on my own journey.
It's kind of like that sort of strength in vulnerability that you sort of feel from opening up to everyone. Is that sort of something that you'd be willing to share during this, like your own personal story of what you've battled and what you've overcome?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I touched on it. I guess sort of early 20s, it started becoming more and more prevalent. Just not feeling great. Anxiety was a really big part of my life for a long time. And I just thought that was sort of normal. I just thought everyone goes through bad times. I'm just going through a bit of a tough time now, but it sort of just kept going. It didn't stop after 1 year, didn't stop after 2 years. 4 years, when I left Bathurst and then went and started doing my other degree in UNSW, was working 2 jobs and studying almost every day. I was in a pretty toxic relationship as well. And everything it just all stacked up and got really dark and really tough. And I remember some of the breaking points, there was a couple there. And one of them was I was on a train going from North Sydney to the city one day for work. And it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:30. I don't know why, but I just had a full panic attack. My chest got tight. I was clammy. I felt like I was going to pass out. Ended up throwing up in a gutter when I got into the city. I just thought, this isn't right. Like, there's something going on here. I can't just keep addressing this by ignoring it and then, self-medicating, because it's just making things worse. And that was when I decided to go see a doctor and go see a counselor. I think from where we are now to where we were maybe 10, 20, 15 years ago is light years. At the start of me sort of figuring out all these things, I didn't know that I had depression. I didn't know I had anxiety issues. I didn't know these things because there wasn't a lot of information going on, but there just wasn't much visibility. And I think that's something that's been massive for Line and Length, is the promotion of young men in Australia, especially, just identifying and understanding that it's okay to have tough times. It's okay to have times when you're feeling down or sad, but the next step is the biggest, and I think one of the most important steps is, once you've identified it, is to go seek some help. And that was hard for me, because that admitted that I had a problem. It admitted that there was something wrong. I'd always tried to be like, I'll get through it. And there was some really dark times there where suicidal thoughts and things like that would come into play, and you can't ignore that. And that's something that I eventually went and saw a doctor about. And I didn't know that you could go see a psychologist on a mental health plan, and it's almost free. I think I was out of pocket like $50 or something each time I saw a psychologist. And that's part of the government scheme. I didn't know that, and that's something that, people need to know. And Line and Length has shone a light on it perfectly. But this is before 2016. I think it was about 6 months before the first Line and Length I actually sought this help. And I started seeing a psychologist and started taking some medication. And I'm on medication now, and I have been now since 2016. And there's times where some people say, oh, maybe you should get off it, or I don't need to. I don't have any side effects. It helps me. And for the time being, I'm just going to keep going. And there's no shame in that. I think the stigma around medication and mental health medications and things like that needs to dissipate, because if it's helping you, then why not? And that's sort of my story up until Line and Length, is that from then onwards, I've now been very vocal about my own story, struggles. I still struggle, but now I know if I'm having a tough time, okay, maybe I need to get to the gym more. Maybe I need to cut back on drinking, because it's just not going to help my head. It's depressant, sorry. Maybe I need to go see a psychologist and just check in. Your brain is a massive part of your body. It's controlling everything. And as I go to the gym to work out your muscles, and I mean, Jackie G had this sort of analogy one time, it really stuck with me, is that you need to work out your brain. You need to keep it in good shape. And I think a psychologist or talking to someone is a really great way to do that.
I think that's you brought up a whole bunch of really awesome things there. And again, thank you for sort of sharing what it is you've been through. You said right at the beginning that there were some unhealthy things that you were doing to cope. What outside of the sort of medication that you've got and the gym, what sort of are some healthy ways of coping with it that you demonstrate or do?
Yeah. So one of my things is when I wasn't on medication, when I wasn't seeking help, I would just sort of self-medicate by drinking too much, because that was just a quick release. I mean, I think everyone has had instances where things get hard and I'm just going to get smashed because that's going to help things. It doesn't. It makes things a lot worse, but you need to go through that sometimes to figure it out. So when I went and saw my psychologist, she was like, well, here's a really good idea. When maybe you feel like you want to knock back a few beers and not do something, go for a walk, go down to the beach, read a book, even just sit outside in the sun for 10 minutes, because that vitamin D on your skin is actually going to help you. For me, everyone's different, and every single person is different in the way they deal with things. But for me, exercise is massive, because you just get those natural endorphins. sleep is really important for me. I need to have at least 8 hours a night, because otherwise, I'll feel a bit off. And just keeping an eye on things. I mean, when things get pretty stressful for me, or when things are getting pretty tough, I just need to be more aware of it. And it's taken a number of years to sort of get to that point. But now when I sort of am having a tougher time or something, I just take a step back. What can I control and what can't I control? And then you can sort of work from there and go, okay, I can't control this, but maybe I can control the way that I'm feeling about it or dealing with it. And that might be a bit more constructive than just sort of going down this path of, I can't control anything, it's all too hard. And, and that's sort of the cycle that I used to get in, unfortunately. But again, everyone's very different. And I think that's the beauty, but also the difficulty of talking about mental health issues, especially in young men, is that everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different set of circumstances. Everyone has different chemical balances in their brain, but everyone has different ways in which they're going to cope. So there's no one cookie cutter way that anyone can look at something and say, oh, I'll be fixed if I do this. That's not how it is. But I think the more we can talk about different options, just try what works for you. Just try an option. And if it doesn't, then okay, move on to something else.
With the whole, when you said you were self-medicating with alcohol, so that triggered something with me. Like my psychologist said to me, what's the reason that you're drinking is really important. So like if you're at a barbecue for someone's birthday or something, like that's still fine to have a drink. But if you're just drinking to numb the pain because it's a Tuesday after work, and that's where I believe you can sort of get into a spiral. So it's sort of, you've got to have that balance, hey, of like, yes, you've still got to be social, but you can't go overboard if the time's not right. So why are you drinking? What's the reason for having this drink?
Exactly, Kel. And that was something that I had to identify a number of years ago now, and something I identify now. I think, I think it's important. I mean, Australian culture sometimes is a bit skewed that way about having a beer with your mates and stuff like that. But it's important also, if you don't feel like drinking is going to be good for your mental health, to be able to step back and say, no, I'm not going to drink tonight, and have that support around you, because, it's a depressant. Again, that's only one circumstance of self-medication that people can go down. And that was just my path. But, I think when you're going through a tough time, when you add a depressant on top of it, it just compounds things. And that's sort of, I think it's just something that everyone needs to understand and learn about themselves. And some people don't have that issue. I did. And, it's just something I have to be aware of.
Yeah, it definitely makes it worse, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
For that period in time, like you might feel better, but Christ, you're going to go backwards.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing about Align and Length, is that we can, the platform that you guys have set up for us over the last, what are we now, 5 years in or 4 years in, is just be able to talk about all these things with people and having discussions with people. I mean, no one knew that I was struggling with depression and anxiety. No one knew this was going on. And to be able to talk to my friends about it was so empowering, but also to hear feedback from other people who said, yeah, hey, maybe I'm struggling a little bit. Like, I didn't know that was something that was going on. And I think it's so important for us to keep this message going forward, because, we have all lost people in the past, unfortunately, to mental health issues. And, it's just not really, we need to be able to do something about it. And I think this is just such a great platform for change.
Just on that long, with sort of getting up and speaking at Line and Length, I believe that you were one of the sort of first people to get or put your hand up to run through your story and sort of talk about what was going on. What was your reasoning behind that? Why did you put your hand up to do that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I think I reached out to Kels maybe beforehand, and when he floated the idea of Line and Length, and I said, hey, I've actually been struggling lately, and I've gone and sought some help about things. He said, would you like to speak? And at first I was, yeah, of course, I'll happily speak. And then as the day came closer, the time came closer, I was like, oh wow, I'm actually really nervous about this. Like,
Yeah, you do.
It's sort of it's such a personal thing, but it's also, how do you articulate to people how you are feeling in a way that maybe they'll understand? Because, these sort of emotions are very hard to sort of replicate to someone if they haven't been through it. But I think, when I got up there, it just sort of came naturally. And after the first few sentences and seeing my mates, there, all the support around me, just sort of gave me that fuel to to really just sort of open up and feel vulnerable in front of friends. And the response I got back from that first time was amazing. And the biggest thing to me that I got out of it was that it prompted other people to think about their own selves. And then people the next year got up and started talking about their own mental health battles and just identifying things. And that was, I think that was the biggest reward that I could have taken selfishly out of it, is that, the helping of the others and allowing people to see that it's okay. That was really amazing.
Yeah, Lomby, you were the first person that messaged me and asked to speak and share your story, and that's just had such a profound impact on the whole concept of line and length. Like, as I referred to last week in my podcast, like, I didn't know it was going to get so personal and stuff. I just wanted to create an environment where we start to really like think about mental health. But the fact that it's got so personal has just added to the day so much. Like, we're also personally involved in this day. We're invested in it. It's ours. And I literally, like, your story was first cab off the rank. So without you being brave enough to get up there and do it, we wouldn't be here today.
Thanks, Kel. I really appreciate it. But I think, it's just one of those natural things that sort of has come about this, the development of line and length from that very first one over at Des Moines to where we are now just shows, I think, that there was such a need for this. And the evolution of it every year is just getting bigger and bigger and more, I guess, in depth. You're seeing people come up and talk about some really intense stuff, but the way that everyone gets around them and to have that platform to share, I think is just so important. And, I really, hats off to you and the others behind the scenes who created this, because it's something really that I really, I find really helpful for me, something I really look forward to, but also just such a shining beacon that I can tell people I'm going there to play a cricket game, but it's so much more than that. It's just this really, intense, emotional, fun, enjoyable sort of thing. And it's just such a great atmosphere when you're there and afterwards and things like that. You can't replicate it, which is just, fantastic.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have this event to look forward to. Sometimes I just think, like, we're so lucky that we've got this with our group of friends, and not that we know everyone now because it's so big, but like, I just worry about people that don't have that. From this, we've seen how prevalent anxiety and depression and mental health issues are in society with people our age, blokes our age. And like, I think, like, if we didn't have this, like, I wonder where I'd be, so like, I sometimes wonder how we can branch out and reach other people and stuff like that, because it's so powerful that you just want everyone to have it, don't you? And you worry about people that don't have this platform, that don't have such good friends and networks that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
In that sort of hope, Kels, that this entire thing does blow up and, it goes absolutely viral, and people and sort of blokes our age all around Australia or even the world start sort of seeing this sort of thing. I guess a question for both of you: what, either outside of line and length or within the sort of line and length concept, if you could let someone know sort of something to sort of help them or get them through it, what would you want to pass on to them?
You go, Lumbie.
I think that the biggest thing that I would want to give to someone, a young man, even not a man, just anyone who's struggling with any mental health issues or not even mental health issues, just having a tough time. You don't have to be diagnosed with depression or anxiety if you're having a rotten 3-6 months. You could just be down. I think the biggest thing and advice I would give to someone is go seek just go see a doctor and then go see a psychologist. No one's going to know. You don't have to tell anyone. It's a very safe and secure environment. But, you go see a professional because they're good at this. They know what they're doing. They know how to sort of get these answers out of you. And from there, you can look at all other different options. But I think that's just the best way to start at something is to just, I think if you don't want to go to a doctor, you don't want to do that, maybe share with some close friends how you're feeling, and they might be able to help you and support you. But then I think the next step is just so important to go seek some professional help. You don't have to go see a psychologist every week. You don't have to see a psychologist more than once if you don't want to. But it's just having those options available to you to start unpacking maybe what's going on in there, because it's very hard to do self-diagnosis, and it's very hard to understand what's the answer. There's lots of people who are very smart and who've spent a lot of time sort of researching these things, and they might be able to help. That's sort of my best piece of advice.
Yeah, I just can't express enough how supportive support networks are. Like, you need to have supportive people around you that you can be honest and vulnerable with, and know that no matter what you're going to say, you're going to get supported. I think that's just so important. And like, I now know that literally anyone at Line and Length, which is 150 blokes, like, you could ring any single one of those and just go like, I'm feeling this, I'm struggling with this. And you just know that instantly you will get the support network that you need and require. I think just long gone are those days of harden up or have a drink and you'll be right, get over it. Like, that's not how this works. You've got to identify that there's a problem, and now you need help with it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so important. I think you're right. I think it's also surrounding yourself with good, positive people. Life's short. You don't want to have negativity in your life, and you want to have people around you who are going to be, supporting you in all these sort of things. And when you reach out to someone and say, "Hey, I'm struggling," you want them to open their arms and say, "Come here. Like, what can I do for you?" And that's just so important to have those people around you. And you're right. You call anyone at Line of Length, and they'll be like, "Sure, I'm on the phone. Send me a text." We go down to the beach. You don't have to have a beer with someone. You can literally just hang out with someone, have a coffee, and say, "Hey, what's going on with you? Like, everything all right?" That goes light years.
Something I'd just like to quickly touch on. Both of you kind of use the support network. Lombi talking more about professional help. Kel's you talking about sort of your mates and the people sort of surrounding you. And just sort of on the psychologist, counselor, psychotherapist, sort of whichever one. If you don't like the first person that you're going to, the first psychologist you're going to see, the first counselor, go back to whoever referred you, preferably a GP, because they've got all the appropriate networks. See them and go, look, I didn't really connect with that person. Is there someone else that you would recommend? Going on, and you said it, the mental health plan, it's such a kind of like, unfortunately, an unknown thing, but so helpful to sort of make going and seeing these professionals really accessible to everybody. Those doctors are going to sit there and they're going to try and get you a person that you connect with, that you can sort of relate with and go back to. And whether it's you're going back once a month or you're going back a couple of days a week, as long as you're connecting with that person, that's what matters. But if you don't feel that connection, then go and ask to see someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, they just want to help you. Doctors, psychologists, they're just there to help. And if you don't have a great connection with a psychologist, or go see someone else, and if you don't think psychologist is the way forward for you, then so be it. I mean, I think the biggest thing I want people to take away from it is that there's no one answer to mental health issues, and just try what works for you, because everyone is different and everyone has their own story to tell. And I think it's just so important to remember that if you are struggling with mental health issues, when you are going down the path of trying to, sort through your own stories and your own, headspace, all the different pathways that you can try and look at. There's just so many options available. And I think that's what you really need to understand. And what we didn't understand as young men, when we were sort of going through this, is, wow, there's a whole lot of resources out there. And it's just so important just to see what works for you.
Yeah, it's so normalized now, isn't it? Just like a discussion about mental health now is just so normal amongst society, especially like our group of blokes now, 25 to 30. To think like a few years ago, no one was talking about it. As I've said, like what was once seen as our biggest weakness is now like our biggest strength in uniting us. It's so cool that we've been a part of this change. Like, I reckon it's so bloody cool.
Yeah, 100%. And
Credit
again,
to yourself there, Kels.
yeah, credit to you and the guys working behind the scenes on Line Length to create such a platform for that change. The of stigmatization that has broken down in the last 6 years, just in our own friendship circles from this, has been amazing.
It's been an absolutely fantastic thing to watch and hear about as well. I've only been a part of Line and Length for what I think about 6 or so months now, and I was looking forward to getting down to Tumbarumba, but sort of these conversations are really cool to have, and being able to sort of help provide a platform to facilitate that is really awesome.
We're going national. It's great.
Yeah, we are. Lombi, I just sort of want to get everyone's ideas. Like, what would you like to see happen with Line Length over the next 3, 4, 5 years? What plans have you got for it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good question, Kels, and I think there's a few things that we got to keep authentic, and you got to keep that conversation and the whole Line and Length is about mental health. It's a day about mental health. It's a day about talking about it. It's a day about being able to raise money for mental health charities, which I think is just so important that we do. Yes, there's a cricket game involved, which is a lot of fun, and there's some beers and things like that, but I think it still needs to always revolve around Line and Length. And I mean, you could even, long term potentially sort of franchise this out in a way where, different towns or different areas will have their own Line and Length on Australia Day or their own days under the umbrella of Line and Length or whatever you want to call it. And it's just a way to promote the discussion of mental health and raising money for mental health. People will have their own spin on how they want to do it and conduct it. But I think at the end of the day, that the core reasoning as to why this occurs is because of mental health and the discussion around it. And I think that needs to be the message that goes forward. I think also with us raising money for mental health charities on the day is also just such an impactful thing, because you walk away from it feeling like you've heard stories, you've talked to people, you've heard there's resources around, but then, raising that money on the other side of it as well just leaves you feeling really sort of proud of the day and the achievements that have been made.
So what I'm taking away from that, Lombi, is expand, but keep authentic.
Yep, as much as we can. I mean, it's hard to do, but I think that's the best way forward.
Yeah.
Let's get other people this tools. Let's get other people this tools, because as we've talked about now, it's been so amazing for us personally and all of our friends. Let's try and see if we can expand it out and give other people the opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. Like, that's what, as I referred to earlier, like, I worry about people that don't have this network that we have created. You can see how it'd be so hard to deal with depression and anxiety. It'd be so hard to deal with that and not have support networks around you. Like, as so unfortunate as it is, like, you can see why suicide's the leading death of people our age. Like, if you don't have that network, it would just be so difficult, because you just play things over and over in your lid. And that's what I want to do. Like, I want to create an environment where for everyone, where you've got a support network around you.
No one's alone. And I think that's the biggest thing, the message from Line and Length that we've always had along the way, is that no one's alone in this, and no one needs to battle by themselves. There's always someone there to pick up the phone, or even if you just want to send a text message. That's just such a big integral key about all of this.
Couldn't agree more, Lombi.
Guys, I think that's a really nice sort of place to wrap up with that kind of final strength in unity message. Lombi, thanks for jumping on and telling your story and sort of answering the questions that both Kels and I have had. And look, to everyone who's watching and listening, look, you can reach out to any of us or anyone in the Line and Length group. There are resources out there as well if you're not comfortable with reaching out to someone. Lifeline, Headspace, Beyond Blue, any of those sorts of places are more than happy to help. So please, if you are in a place where you're not that great, feel free to reach out to any of them or any of us as well. If you also want to be a part of this, reach out to Kels, reach out to myself. I'll be organising times and things to do this so that we can get as many people who are comfortable telling their story out there talking, providing Line and Length while we were unable to do it in person this year, trying to get those stories out and encouraging everyone to talk about mental health and how they're doing. But Thanks for being on today, boys. Really enjoyed the chat, and I look forward to future episodes.
Pleasure,
Great.
mate.
Great work,
Loved it.
guys. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, fellas.
Loved it, boys.